Hello everyone, and welcome to Module 2 of the Standards Mastery Framework Workshop. I will begin by going over some of your questions from Module 1. Overall, we had several great questions, and a couple themes arose. The first is timing. Riverwood, along with most schools in the county, are in the learning phase of this process. This year, you will receive information about SMF via 5 modules. Next school year, 2 subject areas will actually implement the Standards Mastery Framework. There are a few schools in the county that are implementing it, and we hope to learn from them. Many questions were asked about how the standards aligned and how our programs here at Riverwood mesh with SMF. I challenge you to think about standards and curriculum differently. Standards are the knowledge and skills we want our students to master. Curriculum is the plan to teach our students the standards. As many of you mentioned, we have several curriculums here at Riverwood, and that is what makes us special. You are 100% correct. NYP, AP, IB, etc. complement and take the state standards to the next level. The idea is that no matter what school you are at or what teacher you have within a school, students are expected to master a certain amount of knowledge and skills. However, the way in which teachers get students to master that can be unique. If your course does not have an SMF created yet, you may be thinking you have already done this either individually, in your PLC, or during some other district event. You are probably correct. Most likely you have already consciously or subconsciously prioritized your standards, and that goes for teachers of classes that do have the framework developed. It is important to note that the framework does not provide specific interventions for our special education, ELL, and gifted students. So you will need to continue using those research-based strategies that you know and use to meet the needs of all of your students. There is no current plan to change the grading system, so right now all faculty in the county is just being expected to be exposed to SMF. We had a question about common assessments. Common assessments will be housed in Illuminate. Currently, the Fulton County common assessments are not there completely. However, there are several question banks that you can explore, and that will be talked about further in Module 5. So to recap, think of the framework as a guideline for what skills and knowledge students in the course need to master. The way in which you get students to master them is through promoting things such as collaboration, literacy, inquiry, and other strategies and activities that you're doing in your classroom. So here we are at the beginning of the process of creating the framework, and what we're going to be focusing on today are the prioritized standards. So as you can see through this progression, the first step in creating the framework was for the learning architects to identify the priority standards and then evaluate the DOK levels. So what are prioritized standards and how can they guide instructional planning? So within each learning map, up at the top, the prioritized standard is listed. And again, these were standards that were identified by the Fulton County Learning Architects as the most essential for mastery in the particular course. They used 5 criteria to determine which standards would be prioritized. Many of you asked about the alignment to milestones, and unfortunately, the state does not provide this information. So the county developed these criteria and then had teachers select the priority standards. I really encourage you to look through the standards for your class to see how they align to what you would deem as the priority standards. The 5 criteria that the county developed were endurance, leverage, readiness, assessment, and teacher judgment. So in terms of endurance, they looked at whether or not a standard had knowledge and skills that were going to last beyond that one course. For leverage, again, looking at standards to see if the knowledge and skills would cross over into other domains of learning. Readiness, are these knowledge and skills going to be needed or important in future courses? Assessment, would the knowledge and skills in the standard be assessed for mastery on high stakes assessments? And again, as I mentioned, the State Department does not provide that information, and so that's why the 5th criteria, teacher judgment, does play a part in this. So teachers do have to determine whether or not the standard is critical. So how do your unit plans incorporate prioritized standards? Well, there are really 4 guiding questions that you can ask yourself or you can talk about in your PLC as you either plan an upcoming unit or review a plan that you've already created. The first is simple. Which prioritized standards are addressed in your upcoming unit? Everybody in your PLC being aware of what the most important standards are for mastery is important. Those will be kept at the forefront of your thoughts and your decisions and make sure that you're getting information that your students are mastering it. The second is what additional resources are available for addressing the prioritized standards in your upcoming unit. So this is where you start to really plan that curriculum. How are you going to address the need for your students to master those standards? And that can come, the resources can come from your PLC, just teachers within that. It can come from outside resources as well. The third question is, how do you know when your students have mastered the prioritized standards from this unit? And this is really about planning for purposeful questioning, for purposeful assessment. What kinds of formative assessments are you going to give? When are you going to give them? And then what are you going to do with that information? And then the last question is, again, getting at the curriculum. How are you going to get your students to master? So how can you harness choice and voice, just-in-time instruction, and varied strategies to make the prioritized standards in your unit relevant and authentic for your students? So again, to recap, here are 4 questions that you can use as you're planning for yourself or within your PLC to really make sure that you're addressing these prioritized standards and addressing how you're going to get your students to master them, and then how do you know that they're mastering them. So just to recap, we went over what the prioritized standards are and how they were chosen, and then how you could incorporate them into your unit plans and lesson planning in general. I hope that I answered your questions from Module 1. I'm sure that there's questions that are going to be asked about Module 2. So we are asking you to fill out the reflection form. It will look different this time because the county has said that they want you guys to fill out their form. But if you do have questions and you would rather ask me directly, then please send me an email with those questions and I'll do my best to answer them. If you had a question from Module 1 that was not answered and you would still like more clarity on it, also let me know as well. Thank you. Bye.